If security and safety is not involved in the design of programs, it's like not having a monitoring and evaluation plan. How are you going to measure what you have done, what you used this money for, and the effects it's had? It's the same way. If you aren't involved security-wise in the planning of your program and the implementation that follows, you're behind the curve in a big way. That's something that the NGO community is just now learning, I think. Because in many cases security in NGOs is quite new, only a few years old, and you'll see that probably more so when John speaks, and might mention a little bit about how many security directors and field officers most NGOs have. It's tiny. Communications is another huge thing. I can't say enough about redundant comms, satellite phones, data. We don't work anywhere that has any type of infrastructure in the field. We might be in the Capitol. If we do, we have a tiny office because we are out in the field serving the need. That is an extremely important part of designing the programs and make sure those are funded, and it goes along with how we're going to implement there. And then, of course, what we talked before was relationships and social currency. Next slide, please. The World Bank has a good definition for NGOs. It's a very large paragraph, and this is the only sentence that I really like. The diversity of NGOs strains any simple definition. If you've ever worked with or met or had to deal with in a coordination meeting a group of NGOs, it's normally, the few typical American NGOs, big names you probably know, some Italian, some Europeans, probably MSF, which you'll all come back with a good taste in your mouth with, and numerous other small ones. The NGO community really has no standard anything. When we look at actual implementation of operations, the UN provides sphere standards. We have all kinds of important standards in our actual technical fields and how we relate to our beneficiaries, but how we relate to each other is still extremely problematic. When you look at any 2 or 3 NGOs and you try to look at their wiring diagram of how their organization is set up, no two are usually the same. Security is a great example of this. If they actually have a security director or field security people, try to find out who they report to. It'll be a different person in every single organization. It is still very much an evolving field. There's a lot of different types of NGOs. Basically, I'm speaking, and I think we're going to be speaking today, at least John and I, from the relief and development agency side. And that's the ones who are mostly in the field implementing, I would say, as a majority, although there are many others. Next slide, please. Just to give you a couple examples of a very small security global presence for NGOs. There's only 2 really coordination bodies that exist of any decent size. There's a couple of small ones, but these are the 2 big ones. Interaction basically holds the Security Advisory Group, or SAG. That's John's bag, and he will probably speak about that a little bit. The Interaction has 160 members right now, 140? Right around there. 170, we're growing. And every single one of those who have security personnel at their headquarters are a part of this steering group here. The second one is brand new. It's the European Interagency Security Forum. I'm the only American member on that because IMC has a IMC UK, and so I fall into that role also. It is next week. It'll be 4 meetings old. They're coming a long way, and they are a powerhouse in terms of NGO security because they are really, for the first time, and we'll see how long they can keep it up, bringing in that multitude of European NGOs, at least that are concerned with security, which aren't necessarily a majority of them, under one banner. And that's a huge move. And the Europeans have a lot of history in most of the countries we're working in still. So they are an interesting resource to tap into when you're on the ground. I think I'll leave it at that. The second set of coordination bodies are field-based. It's kind of more the tactical level. They are usually single countries. ANSO in Afghanistan is probably the one that you've heard about the most. Possibly you've heard of NCCI. They are basically information services. They can be many other things that center in on security coordination for NGOs. They have, there's been many around the world. They vary in terms of success and failure. Some of their biggest issues are, of course, funding, which you'll hear all the time in the NGO world, and two, management. Because they are not an entity of their own, they have to be owned or housed, so a NGO has to host them. And there are a few NGOs who have been willing to do that to this stage. However, they're extremely important, and I think this is the area on the field level that there are a number of opportunities for commercial and contract security companies, and the reality is also most of the civ-mil relationships between NGOs and military forces on the ground happen here, because this is the security coordination area where most of the guys are former military at some level. They can speak both languages regardless of what country they're in. You're still going to run into some issues with background, culture, politics, but for the most part this is the area where you can contact an NGO and find someone who can speak your language, whether you're a commercial security industry or with the military. And I think there's a lot of potential there for future joint ventures. I think that I'll get myself in a lot of trouble if I talk about that too much at this point, but it's something that we should really, much like we're all kind of going through the civ-mil relations, especially with NGO and the military, there's a lot of loaded issues there, but we're talking it out, we're hashing it out, and it's going to come out in the end. I think that there's a lot to be said and a lot of potential for commercial security firms and logistics firms with NGOs there in terms of information. Next slide, please. This I just wanted to share with you a little bit. It's kind of some trends in the last couple of years. They are listed by most prevalent, and you can see, if you imagine how you've seen operations of your companies operate overseas in hostile environments, and now imagine what I've told you about we don't have huge compounds and armored vehicles and armed guards and all these other things. You can kind of see how we do have a large footprint there. We don't have a huge level of traditional protection security services in place, but there are plenty in the background. We face the same threats. We take less casualties in most happenstance, but these are still the same threats that every humanitarian worker is facing out there. What I'd like to point out even more so is these threats affect our national staff, our local staff, at a rate much, much higher than our expatriate staff. And while traditionally I think all businesses have a real problem figuring out how to, or having the money to, or the interest to protect them, we're seeing a huge climb in the statistics which equal lives of the national staff of NGOs, UN, and other organizations.